Welcome to the most forward-thinking, inspirational podcast in this reality. The show designed to challenge everything we've been taught. If you've ever felt there had to be more to life, more to existence, then you're listening to the right podcast. Time to open your mind and dive in. This is the Mental Mastery Alliance podcast.
And here we go.
I've had something on my mind recently. I'll take a little bit of a break from the conspiracy run, which is fun. I'm having a good time with that. It's perception. And perception is something that I've talked about quite a bit. But how the more you actually look at what perception is, the more the entirety of everything around us becomes less solid, if that makes any sense. I might be losing my mind. If I were to take a guess, it was gone a long time ago. At least the one that they wanted me to have, the programmed one. Perception is huge. When you look at everything, I don't even know how to start this. When you look at everything, it is your perception of what you're looking at. And your perception is based on information that you've acquired, been privy to, situations that you found yourself in, scenarios that you've been in. Your perception today is based entirely on every last one of your unique experiences. What you think of people is also based on that. What you think of places and situations and scenarios is based on what you have uniquely experienced. Perception is very easily manipulated as well. And it's fascinating to know that somebody weaponized perception a long time ago. I would say maybe to benefit themselves. But if you go further back beyond that, if you pull the curtain a little bit further back, it's not about control as we believe it. Again, this is my perception. This is what I'm seeing. But you can look at the television and you can see the television says weird things. Obviously, the television is where we go for our source of information, or used to, for generations. And the newspapers and the media, just the media in general, whatever it is. And we go to this blitzkrieg of bullshit, really. And we think to ourselves, well, the counter to media is social media. And that's easy to be like, well, I don't get my news from the news. I get it from Joe Blow on the TikTok. And the funny thing about that is you're now perceiving exactly what you want to perceive. You're creating another new alternate reality. Alternate to the fact that first we were watching the news, now we're watching social, and now we think we're doing our research. But the same people who own the media own the social media as well. So this is one of those things. It's like, well, how am I supposed to truly deduce then with the information given to me? And again, we roll back into perception. I perceive the news as fraudulent, or I could, let's just say arbitrarily, I perceive the news as fraudulent. And I perceive social media as everything. A hypothetical statement here, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't truly how I believe this to be. I personally find myself often in situations where the normies, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes with my fingers, for lack of better terms, we're just gonna put some people in boxes here. The normies don't like what I have to hear because it goes against their belief system. And the conspiracy theorists, the tinfoil hatters, don't like what I have to hear because it goes against the construct of a conspiracy theory. And what I mean by that is, if you take your perception of everything, and even the fact, way back in the day, I used to love this saying, stand for something or fall for everything. It sounds so poignant and makes you believe that you've really got to get into it. But do you? Because the minute you quote unquote stand for something, you have essentially wedged yourself into the division tactics. And the division tactics are, again, perception. So all of the information that we can have about everything could lead us down a certain path. So our searching or this or that, our desire to find out information could lead us down a different path. I'm not saying have no morals, or I'm not saying have no laurels. I'm not saying any of that sort of stuff, because for me, I'm totally okay with what anybody wants to do, as long as they don't hurt children or other people for the most part. I mean, if you're working from 100% integrity, and integrity, again, is also perspective, because my integrity is, there are certain things I will and won't do. And that's based on, I want to say gut intuition. But that's not to say that I'm righteous or I'm anything above anybody else. I just know that for me to put my head down on the pillow at night, there are certain things that I can't do in a day. Lots of things that I can't do in a day. So I navigate around the things that I can do. Now, that's not to say that people won't perceive me as an asshole because I didn't give them what they wanted, or I didn't live up to their ideology or speculation of who I might be based on their perception, based on the life that they've lived. I am me. I operate with integrity. What am I rapping over here? But I don't do it for anybody other than me. Now, some people would say that's selfish. But we watched this whole thing transpire with regards to COVID and all that sort of stuff, where you're seeing these people flat out tell you that you got to do it for somebody else. We had an entire population inject themselves, and there were probably, I shouldn't say an entire generation, of the entire generation that injected themselves, 95% of them did it for other reasons than medical. In other words, 95% of people didn't believe in the medical practice of this vaccine, or probably even the story. The story sat wrong with them. But there's that 5% who believed everything that they ever saw and happily and overly injected themselves with all kinds of stuff. Now, we're seeing interesting returns on this. Again, I feel like I'm getting off track. Well, this is perspective. So if you went through life without questioning a thing, and you took all the shots, all the go-go juice, well, okay. What's happening to you? What are the results of that? And then you think deeper. Why did they need to do it? And then you start extrapolating from all the other stories you've had, the HPV, the way they rolled out the vaccine back in the early 2010s. All of these things, and then you start questioning all vaccines. And then you start questioning your own design. Because the minute you stop, quote unquote, standing for something, and again, I'm not saying don't stand for stuff. Like have things that are important to you, of course, but be completely open about them. And again, that's not to say, oh, well, he stands against child abuse, but he's open to it. No. I couldn't abuse a child and then go rest easy at night. I just couldn't. So this is the thing. This is operating with integrity. I could abuse an asshole and go rest easy at night, right? But that person had a certain amount of karma, right? And a lot of the times the assholes of the world don't understand that they're assholes, which is where a lot of division comes in too, because they're like, I'm just doing what I know that I need to do to protect and preserve myself. But you'll never find somebody, quote unquote, doing better than you in this universe that will take the time to step back, shit on you, or abuse you. Unless they are destroyed on the inside, which means they're fighting their own battle. And when you understand that when somebody treats you like shit, it's an opportunity for you to set your healthy boundary, that's it. But if we don't have healthy boundaries, and if we haven't seen things enough to understand that we're worth something, then those who start to run over people will continue to run over people. And those who have been run over will continue to get run over until they set that boundary. So where does the fear come from? Perspective. The fear and the insecurity comes from perspective. We, somewhere along the way, were taught that we weren't worthy, we weren't good enough, and that we don't deserve certain things. We accepted that, and we rolled it into the truth of who we are and our existence. But the problem with that is, once you fundamentally start believing things differently, the world changes. So if you feel small, meek, and unworthy, what do you think you're going to attract? This world it's ridiculously awesome. And we're berated with constant negativity from the news, from the media. And if you're a tinfoil hatter, you're berated with bullshit like September 23rd. Now, that's not to say that there aren't obvious patterns of September 23rd showing up everywhere, but the amount of people that were dead set that it was this September or whatever the hell's going on, it was fear. And I look at this whole situation as, do I want to be, if I'm dead asleep, then I'm afraid of the news. If I'm a very wise conspiracy theorist, then I'm afraid of September 23rd, etc. And I think when we get the opportunity to sit down and truly address us, there's so much more to it than our choice to live in fear, scarcity, the lower vibrational aspects of things. But we need those aspects to help us see past it, to help us get through it, to help us step up into what it is that we should be doing. In other words, nothing happens in your comfort zone. It's when you're discomforted or uncomfortable that you step into more and more purpose. So I look at this world as it's quote unquote collapsing, and I think to myself, it is creating unity through chaos. Because if everything was perfect, none of us would really ask any questions, and we'd never get to a higher potential of self. But I've been having conversations with some pretty amazing people all over the world who are more and more aligning with my idea. It's not my idea. It's just the frequency that I'm currently picking up. It's like your brain. We've had this conversation before. You know, your brain doesn't have thoughts. My brain's not up there going, I'm thinking. This is fun. I'm a thing that thinks. It's a pile of goo inside your head. I think what your brain does is controls the system. Like, I don't think about my heart beating. I don't actively try to breathe. I don't try to grow my fingernails or my hair. I think that's just what the meat suit that I'm wearing does and handles. I'm not actively trying to do any of that, but it's being done for me. And by who? And by what? I get to experience it. Because I'm wearing this meat suit, I get to experience this reality. The human experience. And now we have perception and division and subsequently unity. They can only push us so far apart until we come back together. And the they I'm referring to in the height of the third dimension seems like our overlords, the government, the Klaus Schwabs, the news media, right? But the minute you start seeing this, it's your creation. So if you're like, hey, the news is lying to me, but I'm going to continue to watch it, you know, it's dumb. Hey, this food is killing me, but I'm going to continue to buy it. It's dumb. everything that we have here is an opportunity to elevate our presence, step ourselves into a clearer reality. And the only way that we get there is through bullshit, really. We have to see and decipher through bullshit to get to where we want to be. And the amount of bullshit that's facing us right now is all encompassing. It is everywhere, right? But it exists because you need it to exist so that you can perceive it, so that you can change it. When you start changing your perceptions and when you start understanding that I don't know, that there's a higher frequency and a higher vibration and a higher thing that we can all attain, you find yourself in a spot where your past is no longer your worst enemy. I mean, how many of us have kept ourselves prisoners of our past? There are things, and I'll touch on that again too. When you do something in your past, like the worst thing you've ever done to somebody, or the worst thing that was ever done to you, if you're holding on to that, and say you did it, you were the perpetrator in this terrible thing. It was the thing that you did that woke you the fuck up. It was the thing that you did that you're like, and it's bothering you to this day because that's not who you are. That's not your character. If you did something terrible and never thought about it again, that's worse because you're liable to do it again. You know, whatever it is. But again, and we think to ourselves now, and think about this too. Some of us are holding on to things in our past from like 15, 20, 30 years ago. You can't judge yourself 10 years ago based on who you are today. And that happens 99.9% of the time. We are using today's knowledge to shit on 15, 16, 17, 20-year-old selves. And that's brutal. That's like the bloody media trying to cancel John Wayne in 2023 for something that he put out in 1960, 70. When the hell was John Wayne around? I don't even know. It's Cold Outside got canceled by 2023 standards. The song It's Cold Outside. But baby, it's cold outside, because it was an aggressive song. Meanwhile, Wet Ass Pussy was the number one song on the radio. There's this bastardization going on right now where it's trying, like you're literally watching history and the world itself trying to cannibalize itself. You're seeing that in a physical third dimensional term with quote unquote cancel culture and all that sort of stuff. But cancel culture isn't an individual. It isn't you or me being like, hey, I'm offended. It is a conglomerate creating offense and then broadcasting it. And when somebody's like, hey, yeah, that is offensive. Now I'm offended. They've just poured their energy into the douchebag pile because they allow themselves to be triggered or offended by any sort of outside source. You can get through that with perception. I perceive this to be a trap and I'm not interested. I'm more offended by the song Wet Ass Pussy than I am by Baby It's Cold Outside. And I'm not really offended by both. I think it's trash. I think it's garbage. And I think I have no desire to buy any of her material or give my energy to any of her songs. I've never even heard the song all the way through. But I see what it's doing to society. And as somebody who could be called a tinfoil hattist, I could be like, look at how terrible society has become because of this. Right? But look what Madonna was doing in the 80s. Look what Lady Gaga did through the 2000s. It just completely took away all femininity and almost attempted to engrave empowerment into something else. And what happens when people are overtly empowered by their quote unquote sexuality? I'm not speaking in broad strokes here, but I'm saying of the people that I've spoken to and people who have been in these fields, there is an internal depression. And an internal depression is a disconnect. And a disconnect is the desired result. So if the universe all around us, some people could perceive it as trying to kill us. But I perceive the good. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not a tinfoil hatter, even though we are launching a tinfoil hat clothing line. I am a believer in the almighty. I'm a believer in the all spark. I'm a believer in all possibilities. I stand for unity. And that to me is an open conversation. That to me is the ability to see where you come from and maybe expand upon it. Maybe have your ideas merge with my ideas. Maybe have me grow through knowing you. But the idea that I have to sit here and tell you you're wrong and then get animated about it and then fight with perfect strangers on the internet? No, thank you. I'm not here to do that. Granted, years ago I was aggressively everywhere because that's what I thought I needed to do. I can't judge that version of me based on today's knowledge. Hey man, he helped create me. Perception is uniquely yours. The world that you see does not exist behind the eyes of any other entity in this reality. You see things 100% uniquely because your experiences were 100% different than everybody else's. Which is why everybody who's arguing everywhere is right. But being able to say, hey, you know what, I'm right, I'm done arguing, allows us to move through. When we go from arguing to conversing, things change. How many people turned off the news because they were just sick of seeing the doom and gloom, right? Because when you see doom and gloom, you project doom and gloom. When you project doom and gloom, you create it. Tomorrowland by Disney was a massive proponent of this. It also talked about Operation Looking Glass. Basically, that's what they were doing. But they were looking into the future and they were creating the destruction that they were seeing. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The truth is where we are is relatively unknown. But when we firmly believe that we are on a planet floating through infinite expanding space that's forever getting bigger and we're completely useless, that shit doesn't make any sense after a while. Those stories don't make any sense. And if you live in that reality, I mean, I don't think anyone listening to this show lives in that reality. But if you live in that reality, fear and scarcity are very real. When you don't live in that reality, the people who are living with fear and scarcity seem kind of foolish. But our arrogance and quote unquote egoic transfer comes from that as well. So when we drag our third dimensional or egoic thoughts into a higher plane, you start kind of losing your mind in that sense too, because you can't have all of it. So it's not like, boom, you wake up, everything's fresh and clear. It's like, boom, I now have a new perspective. I have a new train of thought. I have a new cycling desire to do something different. And then in begins the growth, the true and ultimate growth of why we exist in this reality. Man, the first 20 years of your life is programmed. You're just downloading. And then 20 through 25, you're kind of applying the download. 30 through 40, you're frustrated with the download. And some of us start really, truly waking up. I've seen them wake up, at any age. At any age. I've talked to people who are 16, 17 who get it. I've talked to people who are 80 who don't get it. So the waking up process really comes down to you. But I honestly think too that there are a bunch of people in this reality and there are a bunch of NPCs. Bit players and characters inside the reality that help you with your journey and with your story. There's also another theory that you are everybody. You're everybody here in a different version of you, a different incantation, a different incarnation. I like that one too because it creates unity. We are all one. We are all energy. And scientifically, when you break it down, the same thing that makes up a tree makes up you, an atom. I'm Adam. Isn't that nice? That's fun. I make you up. Maybe I do. Maybe I do. Maybe I'm in some pod somewhere making all of this up. We don't know what physical reality is. All we really know is that we have consciousness. And because of consciousness, everything else exists. Ladies and gentlemen, perspective, it's unique. It's yours. And it's all beautifully different. And everything inside of perspective changes as perspection changes. Which means even who you think you were back then can change based on how you choose to perceive right now and the lessons therein. Ladies and gentlemen, in the infamous words of Red Green, keep your stick on the ice.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Mental Mastery Alliance podcast. Stay connected with us directly through the mentalmasteryalliance.com. You can also join the discussion on Instagram at instagram.com/the Mental Mastery Alliance. Let the team know you're listening by using the hashtag TMMA or tagging us at the Mental Mastery Alliance. To have your voice heard on the show, leave a voicemail or send a text to 647-338-1265. Long distance charges may apply. If you love us, leave us a review. If you hate us, you spend your time in weird ways, but also leave a review. Every review on iTunes tickles the algorithm, helping us grow. Until next time, unity over division. This concludes the most surreal portion of your day.
You got it, Pontiac.